All right, I'll be going over how to make this modal with style elements in Elm. And from the last video, I'll have the split pane to compare to the code that I've added, and we'll just go through it. So right here in my model, I've added is modal open, that's a Boolean, and then champ selected, which is a maybe champion. And then in the initial state is modal opens, false, and then champ selected is nothing. I have created another decoder for the champion info, which is all this right here. So just the JSON, just like before in the other HTTP request video. And I'm just fetching in the attack, defense, magic, and difficulty, which are all integers. And then in the decode champion, I've added an additional 3 different fields, which are the blurb, so the description right here that you can see in this modal, info, and tags. And tags is a list of string, so that's right there. And our info is actually taking in another decoder, which is this decode champion info. This is the same, so ignore that diff. The only difference is just piping it in instead of just passing it in. And then in the message, I've added a toggle modal, and it gets passed in a maybe champion so that we can use that in the update function. And then in our champion type, I've added blurb, info, and tags, like I just barely went through. And info takes in the champion info type, which is the attack, defense, magic, difficulty, just like our decoder, so those match up. And then our tags takes in a list of string. And now looking at our style union type, that is a style elements, I've added a main font, champion styles, and overlay. And so the main font just sets the font, and then the overlay just has the background with the opacity, and then the cursor pointer so that you can click off it. And then coming into our update function, we have the toggle modal that we've added, just like in our message, and it takes in the maybe champion. So I just say champ M, uppercase M, and so we pattern match over that. So we say case champ M of, and then just champ. So if we have a champion, and if we don't, then we'll set the modal to closed in our initial state. And then our champ selected is nothing. But if we do have a champion, then modal open is just going to be open, and then champ selected is just champ. And this not is just, it negates the Boolean value, so the opposite. If it's true, then it'll set it to false, and if it's false, it'll set it to true. And now we'll come over to our view function, and there's quite a bit going here, so I'm actually going to turn off the diff and then just walk through it because it's all super red. So this is all just style elements. I'm just in my let in block right here. I've added a couple things. So remove extension gets passed into champ, and then it gets the image and removes the extension exactly like it says. And that's just so that part of the API changed a little bit. And that's so I can pass in right here this _0 instead of just .jpeg. It's _0.jpeg instead of just the champ image name. So that's why I've created that function. Then I've created an overlay function, and I'm using the screen, which is a style elements method you can call, and that just positions the element relative to the window. Basically, it's just display fixed, but you can pass in an element. And so I pass in element with the style class overlay, and it takes in a list. So we set the styles to just 100% width, 100% height, because we're making a modal here. So it says black behind the modal, the overlay. And then if you click it, then we'll call the toggle modal, and we're going to pass in nothing because we don't actually want a champ to be displayed because you're clicking off of it. And then inside of our view, we're going to be going just basic style elements. We're just making the modal look good. So we'll create a column and then have a list. And then inside of the column, we'll say, if the modal's open, then we'll display the modal. So we're using some neat style elements methods, which is within, which takes a list and then also an element. So it takes a list of elements and then an element. So our first thing will be within the overlay, and then afterwards is the modal. So that'll just put the overlay behind the modal, and it's just basic z-index, position relative, and that kind of stuff. But style elements does it for you. So we're saying within the overlay, which is this overlay function we've called up here, and then we have our modal, and we're saying no style, passing in the styles afterwards in this list, and then we pass in whatever we want to display. And in our case, we're going to, our champ selected in our state is actually a maybe champion. So we have to call this case modal.champ selected. So now we check to see if we have a champ or if we don't. And if we don't, then it's basically like an error. So we can say error selecting champion. But if we do have the champion, then we can display the champion and all this data and everything. So we say just champ, and now we have the champ and we can work with it. And in here we just call in our columns and rows, which is just basic style elements layouts. And we have our image, so you can see we display on the left here inside this column. And then I remove the extension, that's just so that we can display the proper image. And then over here we're using a wrapped column, so that way the text will just wrap. And the rest is just basic elements. And I'll have the GitHub in the description so you can see the rest of the code.